The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Thank you for attending our webinar. This is our GP add-on ISV series part 4 featuring BGE Green Payables. On the line with me today are Patrice and Simon from BGE. We ask that if you have any questions, use the GoToWebinar questions pane, and we will do our best to answer them at the end. They've been a partner of ours for some time now. They offer a great payment automation solution. I'm really going to let Patrice and Simon explain things a little bit further. So without further ado, I will hand things over to Patrice.
I lost my cursor. Good morning. Let me show my screen here. So my name is Patrice Bremer-Gregoire, and the company is BGE Inc. We're a certified partner, and we've been with Microsoft and GP for all around about 20 years. We specialize in business process and integration. We have dexterity and a lot of .NET development as well. We have actually 3 products that we sell. Green Payable is the one we're going to look at today, and it's all about paying vendors automatically and safely. We also have a fundraising application that does fundraising and donor management and integrates with GP so that you have single entries for gifts. And it's a fairly complete application, but it's not for today's topic. I also have a cost control application that incorporates activity-based costing for Dynamics GP. And again, that's not today's topic. Okay, today's topic is electronic fund transfer, also known as ACH, although ACH is just one type of, and it's domestic, it's US only. It's been commonly used for payroll, and it's increasingly used for vendors. And one of the problems with EFT, just like with credit cards, is the security of it, particularly in today's internet world. Okay. There are several risks attached or threats attached to EFT, like unauthorized payment, falsification of payment, tampering with account vendors so that the payments are redirected to the wrong account. So you could have things like a disgruntled employee would change a payment amount at the last minute, or you could have an employee would go and change all the account information to his or her own account, run a $1 million check, payment batch, and just keep the country with it. So those are threats that need to be addressed. Okay. There are also direct access to the database that could cause either a fraud or wrong payments to be sent. Okay, and there is exposure, of course, to phishing. Okay. What we did with Green Payable is we have a way to enforce authorization on every payment, so that no payment can go without the proper approval. We ensure that no single user can change account information. So you need to have one user enter the change and one user will approve it. Okay. We protect the database against falsification. Essentially, we use cryptography to make a tamper-free or tamper-proof database, so that if somebody goes and make a change directly at database level, Green Payable will actually detect it and refuse to process those records until they have been approved. Okay. We also have automatic email notification to the payee, which allows you to make sure that the payee knows when a payment is being made, and that can actually be copied internally, so you can be aware that a check or payment has been made and in what amount. You have all the remittance information, and we also keep track of the transactions and their approval. Okay. So I'm not going to go through all that this slide, but it's basically we streamline it. The process is fully integrated into GP, so it actually goes within your normal check printing process, where every vendor that you have set up for Green Payable will actually be paid that way. Okay. We also support non-ACH formats, just like JP Morgan Access. We also, and we're starting to work, and we already have Wells Fargo, into credit card payment, where you can actually pay your vendors with a credit card without having to call them, give a credit card number, and so forth. Okay, and we also add more formats as the time goes in, or on demand. Okay, so let's go into the demo. And let's see, let me get into GP. Okay, so this is GP, okay, as you can see. The way you, the first thing you do when you use Green Payable is you have to set up your checkbooks to be configured for EFT payable, okay, and we have a detail window where you enter all the fields that are required the way your bank wants it. And we guarantee that if your bank requires some configuration, as long as it's according to the standard, we will make the necessary modification to the product for free. Okay? And I must tell you that nobody had to take us up on this offer in the last 10 years. But we feel pretty confident that we can accommodate any ACH bank, and we also have other formats that we support, as you can see here. Okay. One of the things we do in Green Payable, which is unique, is we allow you to configure addenda records. Addenda records are actually transferred to the payee through the banking system, and they see it on their bank statement. Okay, we allow you to create different formats for different vendors, so that you can actually send the information about the payment directly with the payment. Okay, and those formats are fairly flexible. This one, for example, would include the invoice number, the invoice amount, the discount taken, and the net paid on this particular invoice. And we actually generate that based on the apply record on each payment. Okay, and that, as I said, goes to the through the bank network. Okay. I talked about security. Here is our security setup window, and there are two parts to this window. The top part here will allow you to set up a task, and that's part of the GP security system, so there's nothing esoteric here. What this says is that in order to make a change to a vendor account setup, okay, somebody else, a different user, will have to approve it, and that different user will have to have this task in one of their security profile. So power users, for example, would not necessarily have the right to approve anything, okay, because it's not a matter of accessing the window, it's a matter of being authorized to approve an account change. And as I say, the user who actually made the change would not be able, allowed to approve it. The other thing you can configure is approval on each payment. Okay, the way I have set up that grid is you have a maximum any payment up to $100. Okay, do not need approval, so those can be paid automatically without approval. any payment between $100 and $1,000 would require one user to approve it, and that user would have to have this task in their profile. Okay? And any payment over $5,000 would require two users to approve it, and those users would have to have this task. Okay, those could be different. They just happen to be the same here, but there will have to be two different users going and approving payments that are over $5,000. Okay, and that's very similar to having two signatures on a check. Okay. The other thing we can do is you can set up email formats for your vendors. You can have any number of formats. We provide two by default. One is text and one is graphics. You can actually take those formats, duplicate those reports. They're report writer reports, so it's technology that you're aware of in GP. You can duplicate them. You can make modifications and insert them into this table, and every one of your vendors can have the information they want in their remittance information, and that's sent through email. Okay, and we'll see that later on. Okay, so that's how you configure the product. Okay, now you need to configure your vendors. Okay, and when you configure your vendors, you need to configure them with account information. Okay, so let's take a vendor here. And we're going to take, let's see, let's take this vendor for example. When you set up this window, you select the format you want. I have three that are configured. Those are only the formats for which you have a checkbook that is configured. Now, most of the time you would have only one bank, but if you have two banks and then you require two formats, we would actually support that as well. Okay, here you enter your account information, and as you can see, the routing number and account number are obfuscated on the screen, so nobody can actually go and peek and see those account numbers on the screen when a user is actually working with this window. And they're not only obfuscated on the screen, they're also encrypted in the database. So if you were to look at the database for these vendor records, you would see exactly those fields with the X's, and somewhere else in the database in an encrypted record that have the actual value for those fields. So if somebody were to do a dump of the database or steal it, they would not get any of those account information. Okay. You can set up here the type of transaction, and we support essentially all the electronic payment transactions of ACH. So depending on the type of transaction, you have more or fewer type of options. For example, if you have a CCD, then you could get an addenda and select your addenda. I have only one. That would be the default. If you use PPD, we also support PPD check, which some banks will take to take a PPD type transaction through the ACH network and print a check. And then if you use CTX, then we also support the 820 transactions set, which is a standard for paying vendors with full automated or computer readable remittance information. Okay, I'm going to set this one back to PPD and go to the next. Actually, I'm going to discard them. As I mentioned, one of the things we do is prevent one user from making a change. This record has been changed by lesson user 2. I just happen to know that. As you can see down below, it is pending approval. Okay, so this account information here will not be used to make a payment until it has been approved, and it has been approved by a user other than listen user 2. Okay. So the way, so that's, now we've configured our vendors, we configure our email and all the ACH parameters. So now we're ready to run into production. Okay. The way you pay those vendors is your normal select check process. I'm going to call that demo, and I'm going to add this batch. Okay, and this is your normal check batch. The only thing is we don't require you to make that an EFT batch. The batch can contain both EFT and non-EFT payments, and you don't have to differentiate between the two at the time you are creating your payments. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go from A through C, okay, and insert and just build the batch. So I'm building a batch of the transactions that I had created before, and those are normal GP transactions, okay, normal vouchers that are going to be paid here. Okay. So now that the batch is created, at the time I would normally print check. Instead of going into the print check screen, I'll go into the process green payable payment, okay, and I will pick the same batch. Okay. So here's the batch. At this point, I can set up the effective date for my payment. Okay. And when I click process here, what the system will do is go through that batch and look for two things. Accounts that are not being approved, okay, or not set up correctly, and vendors that are not set up for ACH pay or for EFT payment at all. What happened in this batch is I got both cases. Okay, so if I click on process, I can see that the batch contains vendor with pending accounts approval. Do you want to proceed anyway? I'm not going to proceed here. Okay, if I were to proceed, then those vendors would be paid, would remain in the batch to be paid by check. What I'm going to do instead is go into the how do you call it, account approval, which I thought I had in here, and obviously I don't. So let me go into tools. You can get to those windows both through the menu system and through the you can put them on the shortcuts. Okay. So here is my vendor accounts approval, and as you can see, I have the this account, and I show you the account number in clear here. The reason for that is if there has been tampering and you got a whole slew of vendors and they have the same account, then there's something suspicious. Okay, so at this point, to show on this window, those account numbers are unencrypted. Okay, so now I approve the selected account, and it disappears. If I go back to my process green payable, okay, and I process again, now it's gone through that. There is no unapproved vendor in the batch. What it's asked me to do is to split the batch. Okay, so if I know that there are vendors that I want to pay by check on this batch, I can split it. Okay, so splitting it will actually take all the EFT vendors and put them in a separate batch, and that's a batch that's going to be processed here. Okay, so at this point I process the batch, and it gives me a summary window with what's on this EFT batch. Okay, I can print this. I'll print it to the screen, and it shows me all the payments. So I have one vendor for $58. I have one vendor that has a I believe it's a CTX type transaction where a whole slew of invoices can be paid, and those are then the records that will be transferred to the payee through the banking system, and then I have a set of other payments down there. Okay, so at this point, I'm not ready to create the actual EFT file because the some of those payments are not approved. This is your normal print remittance and posting window from GP. You can post before or after you have processed the EFT file. It doesn't really matter from a green payable standpoint. Okay. If I go into this file selection window and I open it, what I do is I get all my transactions for EFT. So we can see that only one transaction here is approved. This is an offset transaction that would only be applied to check, and actually I was not. Sorry, let me go back a second. These are the work files. These are the batches that have been created and are supposed to be processed. I don't want to process this batch. This is the batch we just created. So here you can actually combine batches, or you can just use or process them individually. And individually is what I meant to do here. Okay. Oops, and I picked the wrong one. Sorry about that. So I don't want this one. Okay, so here's the batch of our transactions that correspond to the printout that we saw a minute ago. Okay, as you can see, only one transaction here is approved, and that's a transaction that's under $100. Okay, all of those transactions are above $100, so they're not approved. Okay, so I cannot save this batch at this point, but what I can do is go to the approval window, and that shows me all the transactions that I can approve. Normally it would be a different user doing this, but in this case I do have the authorization of doing both. So I can go in here and look at each of those transactions. If I select a transaction, I can actually see what has been applied to it. Okay, and I can zoom to the document, and I can also see the distribution down below. So I can look at each of the transactions and what the GL distribution, if I need that information to make the approval. Okay, in this case, I'm just going to approve everything, approve selected, and close the window. Okay. Now at this point, if I go back to my ACH selection, then I can see that some of the transactions have been approved. Again, I got both files, but this transaction has been approved, and from my batch, those, okay, were not approved. Okay, so now I can close this, and I have to log on as lesson user 2. And as lesson user 2, I can look at the transactions that I can approve, and those are the transactions that remain. The $333 transaction is not showing up because it's already approved, and all the transactions above 5,000 are here ready to approve. So I approve them. Okay, and I'm going to go back to lesson user 1. And now if I go to my CH selection, again, I'm going to pick that one batch, which is the top one. And here everything is approved, and that corresponds to the file we had seen earlier. So at this point, I'm going to save this, okay? When I save it, it's going to ask me for where I want to put the file. I'm just going to leave it here. What we recommend is that you would put the file in a folder that is encrypted in the by the file system, so that you don't have any unencrypted EFT file on your system. Okay. So if I save it here, now I get back to the same window I was, and it'll again show me all the transactions that have been paid. Okay, so those are all my paid transactions. Okay, and at this point I can just click OK here, or I can go into the send email. Okay, and the send email allows me to send an email to all the vendors in that batch that had an email set up, and of course a payment. If I go and look at this vendor, for example, I can look at the remittance. This is what's going to appear in the body of the email because that's a text file. Okay. This vendor, on the other hand, has opted to the PDF attachment, and this is the remittance information that would go into this as a PDF attachment. Those are basically the same as the GP remittance reports, but as I said, you can modify them, add information, and add whatever field. You can go through and link to just about anything. And again, you can do that before or after posting. It doesn't matter. For PDF, you can actually enter the body of the email here, and then when you're ready, you go select the one you want to send and do send select, and that will send those emails. Or you can actually select the one you want to send and only send the email. If there's an email you don't know you're never going to want to send, you can actually delete it. Okay. So that basically show you a tour of the product. One thing I need to mention that I didn't demo, but if you decide that one of those payments is not going to be approved, what you can do before you created the file is you can go into GP and void the payment, and as the payment is voided, it is automatically removed from the approval list, so it's going to disappear and will never be included in an ACH file. And that basically concludes a tour of the demo. Scott, do we have questions?
It doesn't look like there's any questions at this time. Thank you for that, Patrice. So certainly very informative. I'm putting our email right here in the chat pane, so if anyone does have questions after the webinar, they can feel free to ask us then. We will also be posting the PowerPoint slides on our website if anyone would like to download those, so you can look there. Again, we thank you for attending. And Patrice, is there anything else from you guys?
No, as I said, we not at this point.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you and Simon for your time.
One thing maybe.
Simon?
Yeah, one thing we may want to highlight is, the in the GP, if you want to separate the vendor for paying by check and paying by ACH, you actually manual process, and we automatically split them. That's one important point. And
okay,
then, well, obviously, all the security that we build in for it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending and taking the time to look at the product. And of course, we're open to one-on-one demos. And if you have questions, detailed questions about the product, we'd be very happy to answer.
Yeah,
okay. Well.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And, again, if you'd like to know more, you can certainly follow up with either one of us, and we're happy to fill you in on some more information.